My death. Again, I must have dozed for a while, but not for long because the clock still seemed to say 9:30. Then suddenly I woke up with the strangest feeling. Somehow my instincts warned me of impending danger. I looked around the room. The door had been pulled half closed. The dim light was still on over the small sink by the door. I felt myself become keenly alert and growing in fear. My senses told me that I was alone, and I could feel my body becoming weaker and weaker. I reached for the cord near the bed in an attempt to call the nurse, but try as I might, I could not bring myself to move. I felt a terrible sinking sensation, like the very last drops of blood were being drained from me. I heard a soft buzzing sound in my head and continued to sink until I felt my body become still and lifeless. Then I felt a surge of energy. It was almost as if I felt a pop or release inside me, and my spirit was suddenly drawn out through my chest and pulled upward as if by a giant magnet. My first impression was that I was free. There was nothing unnatural about the experience. I was above the bed, hovering near the ceiling. My sense of freedom was limitless, and it seemed as if I had done this forever. I turned and saw a body lying on the bed. I was curious about who it was, and immediately I began descending toward it. Having worked as an LPN, I knew well the appearance of a dead body, and as I got closer to the face, I knew at once that it was lifeless. And then I recognized that it was my own body. That it was my own. That was my body on the bed. I wasn't taken aback, and I wasn't frightened. I simply felt a kind of sympathy for it. It appeared younger and prettier than I remembered, and now it was dead. It was as if I had taken off a used garment and had put it aside forever, which was sad, because it was still good. There was still a lot of use left in it. I realized that I had never seen myself three-dimensionally before. I had only seen myself in the mirror, which is only a flat surface. But the eyes of the spirit see in more dimensions than the eyes of the mortal body. I saw my body from all directions at once, from in front, behind, and from the sides. I saw aspects to my features I had never known before, adding a wholeness, a completeness to my view. This may be why I didn't recognize myself at first. My new body was weightless and extremely mobile, and I was fascinated by my new state of being. Although I had felt pain from the surgery only moments before, I now felt no discomfort at all. I was whole in every way perfect, and I thought, this is who I really am. My attention went back to the body. I realized that nobody was aware that I had died, and I felt an urgency to tell somebody. I'm dead, I thought, and no one is here to know it. But before I could move, 3 men suddenly appeared at my side. They wore beautiful light brown robes, and one of them had a hood on the back of his head. Each wore a gold-braided belt that was tied about the waist with the ends hanging down. A kind of glow emanated from them, but not unusually bright, and then I realized that a soft glow came from my own body, and that our lights had merged together around us. I was not afraid. The men appeared to be about 70 or 80 years old, but I knew somehow that they were on a timescale different than Earth's. The impression came to me that they were much older than 70 or 80 years old, that they were ancient. I sensed in them great spirituality, knowledge, and wisdom. I believe they appeared to me in robes to evoke the impression of these virtues. I began to think of them as monks, mostly because of the robes, and I knew that I could trust them. They spoke to me. They had been with me for eternities, they said. I didn't fully understand this. I had a difficult time comprehending the concept of eternity, let alone eternities. Eternity to me had always been in the future, but these beings said they had been with me for eternities in past. Eternity to me had always been in the future, but these beings said that they had been with me for eternities in the past. This was more difficult to comprehend. Then I began to see images in my mind of a time long ago, of an existence before my life on earth, of my relationship with these men before. As these scenes unfolded in my mind, I knew that we had indeed known each other for eternities. I became excited. The fact of a pre-Earth life crystallized in my mind, and I saw that death was actually a rebirth into a greater life of understanding and knowledge that stretched forward and backward through time. And I knew that these were my choicest friends in that greater life, and that they had chosen to be with me. They explained that they, with others, had been my guardian angels during my life on earth. But I felt these three were special, that they were also my ministering angels. They said that I had died prematurely. They somehow communicated a feeling of peace and told me not to worry, that everything would be all right. As this feeling came to me, I sensed their deep love and concern. These feelings and other thoughts were communicated from spirit to spirit, from intelligence to intelligence. At first I thought that they were using their mouths, but this was because I was used to people speaking. They communicated much more rapidly and completely in a manner they referred to as pure knowledge. The closest word in English we would have to define it is telepathy, but even that doesn't describe the full process. I felt their emotions and intense. I felt their love. I experienced their feelings, and this filled me with joy because they loved me so much. My earlier language, the language of my body, was truly limited, and I realized that my former ability to express feelings had been almost non-existent compared with the ability of the spirit to communicate in this pure way. There were many things that they wanted to share with me and that I wanted to share with them, but we all knew that the concerns of the moment took precedence. I suddenly thought of my husband and children and was worried as to how my death would affect them. How would my husband care for 6 children? How would the children get along without me? I needed to see them again, at least to satisfy my own concerns. My only thought was to leave the hospital and go to my family. After so many years of waiting for a family, of working to keep my family together, I was afraid that now I would lose them, or perhaps I was afraid that they would lose me. Immediately, I began to look for an exit, and I spotted the window. I quickly went through it and emerged outside. Soon I would learn that I didn't need to use the window, that I could have left the room at any point. It was only because of my lingering thoughts and therefore limitations of mortality that I thought of using the window. It occurred to me that I was in a slow-moving mode because I still thought in terms of having my physical body, which in fact my spiritual body could move through anything that had been solid to me before. The window had been closed the whole time. My trip was a blur. I began moving at tremendous speed now that I realized I could, and I was only vaguely aware of trees rushing below me. I made no decisions, gave myself no directions, just thought of home and knew I was going there. Within a moment, I was at my house and found myself entering the living room. I saw my husband sitting in his favorite armchair, reading the newspaper. I saw my children running up and down the stairs and knew that they were supposed to be getting ready for bed. 2 of them were in a pillow fight, actually, normal bedtime procedure for our children. I had no desire to communicate with them, but I was concerned about their lives without me. As I watched them individually, a preview of sorts ran through my mind about them, enabling me to see ahead into each of their lives. I came to know that each of my children was on earth for their own experiences, that although I thought of them as mine, I had been mistaken. They were individual spirits, like myself, with an intelligence that was developed before their lives on earth. Each one had their own free will to live their life as they chose. I knew that this free will should not be denied them. They had only been placed in my care. Although I don't recall them now, I knew that my children had their own life agendas, that when they had completed them, they too would end their stay on earth. I foresaw some of their challenges and difficulties, but knew that these would be necessary for their growth. There was no need for sorrow or fear. In the end, each of my children would be all right, and I knew that it would be only a brief moment before we were all together again. I felt bathed in serenity. My husband and my precious children, this family I had waited so long for, would be all right. I knew that they could go on, and so, then, could I. I was grateful for this understanding and felt that I was allowed to reach it so that my transition through death would be easier. Now I became filled with the desire to move on with my own life and to experience all that awaited me. I was drawn back to the hospital, but I don't remember the trip. It seemed to happen instantaneously. I saw my body still lying on the bed, about 2.5 feet below me and slightly to my left. My 3 friends were still there, waiting for me. Again, I felt their love and the joy they felt in helping me. As I was filled with their love, somehow I knew that it was time for me to move on. I also knew my dear friends, the monks, would not be going with me. I began to hear a rushing sound. The tunnel. When you are in the presence of enormous energy, you know it. I knew it now. A deep rumbling, rushing sound began to fill the room. I sensed the power behind it, a movement that seemed unrelenting. But although the sound and power were awesome, I was filled again with a very pleasant feeling, almost hypnotic. I heard chimes or distant bells twinkling in the background, a beautiful sound I'll never forget. Darkness began to surround my being. The bed, the light by the door, the entire room seemed to dim, and immediately I was gently drawn up and into a great whirling black mass. I felt as if I had been swallowed up by an enormous tornado. I could see nothing but the intense, almost tangible darkness. The darkness was more than a lack of light. It was a dense blackness unlike anything I had known before. Common sense told me that I should have been terrified, that all of the fears of my youth should have risen up, but within this black mass, I felt a profoundly pleasant sense of well-being and calmness. I felt myself moving forward through it, and the whirling sound became fainter. I was in a reclining position, moving feet first, head slightly raised. The speed became so incredible that I felt that light years could not measure it. But the peace and tranquility also increased, and I felt that I could have stayed in this wonderful state forever, and knew that if I wanted to, I could. I became aware of other people as well as animals traveling with me, but at a distance. I could not see them, but I sensed that their experience was the same as mine. I felt no personal connection to them and knew that they represented no threat to me, so I soon lost awareness of them. I did sense, however, that there were some who were not moving forward as I, but were lingering in this wonderful blackness. They either didn't have the desire or simply didn't know how to proceed, but there was no fear. I felt a process of healing take place. Love filled this whirling, moving mass, and I sank more deeply into its warmth and blackness and rejoiced in my security and peace. I thought, this must be where the valley of the shadow of death is. I had never felt greater tranquility in my life.